Okay, hi everyone. I think we're about to get started. I'm really excited to see lots of people here. I just wanted to say I'm really happy to be here today. I'm from Vancouver, and it's always so nice to come over to Victoria. There's more sun here. It's a beautiful day today, and I just want to reflect on how lucky we are to live here with the ongoing crisis, and I feel very, very thankful to be here today and to be able to share more about what the Linux Foundation is doing. And so the focus of the talk today is really since we're in the energy track, is on the research work that we've done with the energy team at the Linux Foundation, and specifically how open source plays a role in decarbonization. And so I'm from the research team. I'm a program manager, and I also do some research for the team. And we've worked with Linux Foundation Energy on a number of different projects. So I'll first introduce LF research, I'll introduce LF Energy, and then I'll dive into a few key findings from our more recent research reports and give a bit of a sneak peek on some upcoming research we're doing. That's Canadian, which is exciting because LF is primarily, we're global, we're open source, but our team is primarily American. So, okay, so I've just put the Linux Foundation Research's mission statement up on the slide here. We were formed in 2021 with the intention of describing and analyzing the impact that the LF ecosystem has on its community. And so in our research, we conduct research on core topics of interest across this ecosystem, whether it's generative AI, standards and interoperability. And then we also run research with specific projects and verticals, to answer research questions around what is the adoption or use or contribution trends we're seeing, what are some wider technology trends in adoption, what's the state of collaboration, lots of questions around impact and how these organizations are impacting their communities and their developers. So we really run a gamut of research, and our aim is to be the go-to repository of open source insights that benefit organizations around the world. So we, as I mentioned, founded in 2021, and as we do our research, we run it across a few different methodologies. We have quantitative research that is based on data that is collected through surveys. We also run qualitative research that is based on interviews that we run with subject matter experts. And we've also done some data set analysis in the past. Typically, our research projects involve a combination of all of these so that we can produce rigorous and nuanced survey instruments and also findings from our studies. We've published over 40 reports to date. These publications come with a written research report that often includes graphs and depictions of the research or the findings. And all of these research reports are published under a Creative Commons license, which means they're widely distributable and accessible with attribution. And we also, if it's a quantitative study, we publish our data on Data World, which allows us, after we've anonymized the data set, individuals who want to do research with the data we've collected can access it and use it. So we also, just to kind of organize ourselves and our research questions, we use a few different frameworks. We run research on technology horizontals, so looking at a technology like, for example, blockchain and its different applications and the impacts it's having in those applications. We also do research projects along industry verticals, so what are the use cases, what are the adoption trends we're seeing in a specific industry, such as our financial services report that came out in a few weeks ago. And then we also run research on geographic lines. This is really useful to understand what some trends are across different regions, what's happening, is the community more fragmented, where's the collaboration happening, and how can we better support a more unified ecosystem. And then finally, we also run research with an ecosystem approach, which is really important for research questions that have a ton of different stakeholders, different perspectives, political considerations, technologies, geographies. And those often, we run some of that research. The ecosystem research is often the approach we take for sustainability questions. So getting back to the title of this topic, what does open source have to do with decarbonization? And I'm not sure if I really need to explain that to most people here, but this is really where LF Energy comes in. So a little bit about the organization. LF Energy is an umbrella project that's hosted within the Linux Foundation group, and LF Energy is a neutral organization in and of itself that hosts our energy-specific software and hardware projects. And they bring together different stakeholders and technologists to develop solutions for decarbonization. So as I'm sure many of us know in this room, as the energy industry looks towards this transition to decarbonization, this transition really revolves around digitization and software. So why did we feel the need to create LF Energy? Why does an organization like this exist? So in this process of digital transformation, there are calls for communities and groups to come together to help guide this fragmented industry towards solutions that can help us meet our carbon targets and other sustainability goals, but that also encourage innovation. And so the Linux Foundation's ability really rests in its ability to represent a neutral home for these software projects. Linux Foundation Energy provides project management, provides support for licensing needs, communications, and also as a way to bring the community together and manage and engage that community. A big part of Linux Foundation Energy and its importance to this ecosystem is that it allows for open development of software protocols that are accessible, scalable, and modular. As we'll see in the coming slides on our research projects, this kind of modularity and scalability is crucial to developing solutions. The other important aspect of LF Energy is that it brings all these stakeholders together and aligns the community and its solutions on shared goals, values, and priorities, such as cybersecurity, flexibility, and interoperability. And I just wanted to leave a slide here to have a bit of a visual representation of the LF Energy ecosystem, which now hosts over 25 projects. There is a landscape on the LF Energy website that shows all of the different projects that are involved in its ecosystem. But as you can see from this slide, the software projects span distribution, commercial systems, residential system, transmission, and so the goal is to really touch every aspect of the energy sector and the energy pipeline. So ever since the Linux Foundation research's inception in 2021, we've partnered with LF Energy to investigate this question of what does open source have to do with decarbonization? What is the state of open source in this sector? And we've run a number of different studies. One of them, I'll talk about two today in detail. One of them is the 2023 Energy Transformation Readiness Study. And so this one was the aim to understand where the sector is in terms of energy adoption, open source adoption, to support the modernization of the electric grid. And we wanted to understand how this sector also understands and has been adopting open source. So we surveyed utilities on these topics. What is their understanding of open source? Have they implemented it? Do they see it as a valuable tool for digitization and for transformation? And one of our main goals of this research project was to understand where the gaps are in education when it comes to utilities, but also regulators and other stakeholders on open source, because often open source can be an understood topic, and where can we help support regulation that best prioritizes this kind of useful transformation and more kind of collaborative transformation. So I'll go through a few key findings from this study. The QR code takes you to the page where the report lives, and I'm also happy to chat more about any of these findings, but a few highlights. So just a reminder that this was survey-based. So out of all of our respondents, we noticed that utility digitization seems to be crucial for decarbonization, where more than three-quarters of our respondents have a clear strategic plan in place. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the other slide. Sorry about that. Digitization plays a critical role in decarbonization. Respondents felt that some of these important features include smart home management, EV charging, and also the improving dynamic demand response. Next slide, which I kind of already alluded to, but there's a good story around, at least for us, around where these utilities are at when it comes to developing digital strategic plans. So we saw that a majority of our respondents have a clear plan in place. And so moving from understanding it to actually implementing it, that was a good story for us to see. In terms of where open source sits in our respondents' understanding, we found that they've listed a few benefits. The main ones were cost reduction and transition speed up, which they felt were the most important benefits in this sector. In terms of barriers, we did have a few come up around the understanding the actual performance of open source. Another key factor was whether or not there's enough support for implementing open source and maintaining the open source project or implementation. And then there was some questions around the security of open source code. So these were some really important barriers for our respondents. And as we move forward in this space, one way to address these concerns were to fill in these knowledge gaps around what open source is, its security, and provide some sort of comparisons around where open source can provide benefit and what's available for support. So this is important if we want to move forward with open source solutions in the space. The next project was the research we did sponsored by FutureWay, where we looked at what is the state of open source in the microgrid sector. This one was a qualitative report that we ran with a team of advisors and experts in the microgrid sector, and we also had a research team come in and run 17 subject matter experts with individuals in the microgrid sector. And we wanted to know the state of open source, but also how do we actualize the benefits of open source in this specific realm of microgrids, and what are the barriers to adoption, if there are any. And so I'm just going to go through again a few key takeaways on this report. So we found from speaking to our subject matter experts that the microgrid sector is really accelerating, but the actual open source aspect of microgrids is quite nascent, despite the fact that we can recognize that it has the ability to democratize, standardize, and better integrate microgrids into the system. And so a bit about how open source can do that, and what our interviews told us and our research told us is that open source as an ethos drives consensus. And so this creates an environment where we can build out standardized and interoperable microgrids and bring individuals together to develop those kinds of solutions. Another way it does this is that open source enables innovation. And so through the different business models that open source allows, the talent pipelines, having those resources available of developers and maintainers, and then the cost reductions of implementing an open source solution. They're not zero cost, but there are some reductions in place if you're looking at that compared to proprietary or closed software. We also found that energy incumbents, there is some uncertainty around the value of microgrids, and particularly open source. And so again, the education component is an important component from this research as well, sharing data and aligning goals, which makes organizations like Linux Foundation Energy, which brings stakeholders together, really valuable. And finally, of course, there's a big regulatory component of this research, as microgrids are fairly new and the implementation of open source, as we saw in this sector, is quite nascent. There is policy in place, but it is quite fragmented, and it also supports more centralized infrastructure. And so I think organizations like the Linux Foundation can also play a role in educating policymakers and, again, bringing stakeholders together to collaborate on more effective policy. So just to summarize a bit of what I just spoke about and get back to this role of open source, as I mentioned before, decarbonization requires digitization, and having high-value digitization that is impactful, long-lasting, and sustainable is maximized with interoperable, modular, and collaborative software. And so open source answers a lot of those, or answers kind of those three adjectives of software. Adjective's the right word. So open source plays a role by supporting this modular development of software. We really saw that in the microgrid study, where you have all of these different pieces that go into a microgrid, and you need those to all talk together, whether it's hardware, software. It's really important to have that kind of communication happening between those pieces, especially if we want to build prosumer market where you have other stakeholders besides larger incumbents involved in the distribution of energy. And then, of course, open source helps speed up adoption and transitions, again, with that kind of modular approach of these, we saw a lot of this in another research report we did where open source provides the building blocks where you can go in and use code and then develop on top of it. And so that helps speed up from if you're coming from nothing. As I mentioned earlier, open source does help reduce costs, which again helps that kind of speed. And then it also increases access to talent, where you have these maintainers in organizations like, from different organizations that you collaborate with on open source code. Also this concept of sharing is a big part of open source, so sharing data, training, resources, documentation, all of this is really helpful. And then, as I've mentioned a number of times, and is kind of the theme of at least the previous session I was in, collaboration is super important if we want to move towards digitization that can interoperate. So bringing these different stakeholders together under this kind of umbrella of open source is really valuable. So I've just put up 3 other studies we've done in the energy sector. The one on the right was sponsored or in partnership with Linux Foundation Energy. That was one of the first reports we actually did at LF Research. This was a case study where we interviewed 2 individuals, one from Alliander and one from Artea, and they gave us kind of their story on how they implemented open source in their organizations, both quite different stories, but a really interesting piece of knowledge to take back if you're looking at implementing open source in your incumbent organization. The one in the middle, that was done with the Hyperledger Foundation. This one we wrote before Ethereum forked. So this one was looking at the carbon footprint of NFTs, which of course was a massive concern for a long time, but still kind of looking at what the carbon footprint of blockchain generally is. And then the second one is related in topic, where what is the sustainability of Web3, but also how does Web3 help us be more sustainable? So those are 3 quite varied. Well, the left and the middle are related to blockchain, but some more varied research that you can take away if they're of interest. Finally, we have some upcoming research. It's Canadian, which I'm excited about. Again, I work on a very American team. So we recently just signed a grant with NRCan to do some research into interoperability in the energy sector. And so, as I've spoken about, and as we all know, interoperability is quite crucial for data sharing, for network sharing, and the entire stack of technology needs to be able to interoperate. And so NRCan, we had discussions with NRCan around what they really want to dig into, at least on the team that we're working with, is what is the state of interoperability in the Canadian energy sector? what do regulators know about it? And Linux Foundation, as you've seen in this other research, can play a role in education. And so how do we educate more on interoperability? And open source and interoperability go quite well together. So this is what this research is. It's a qualitative study. We're looking for individuals to interview in the Canadian energy and regulatory space. So please come talk to me about this if you're interested or just wanted to learn more. I'm happy to chat about that. So yeah, that was kind of some exciting news this week. And that's all I have for you today. Again, we run projects across topic lines, so if you want to talk about any other research we've done, really happy to do that within or outside of the energy sector. But I really appreciate everyone coming here to learn more about LF Energy and LF research, and yeah, happy to take, I was supposed to mention, I think if we have time, it looks like we have 8 minutes. So if there's any questions, we're going to use a mic so that the people on the Zoom, oh, you have the mic. The people on Zoom can hear. So if you do have a question, wait for the mic.
Well, sorry, just to be accurate, we're not going to move the mic across the room because it causes echoes, specifically in this room. So if you can just come over here to ask a question, that'd be really, really appreciated.
The extra burden of getting out of the seat. You don't have to, just because you're holding it. Good? Okay. Anyone online? I don't know how I tell that, but. Okay. I guess I explained it really well, or really badly. Thanks, everybody.